Part of what creates the tension in the scene is that they needed a vocal sample from Davian, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. So a big piece of the scene is where, you see Tom Cruise, they're in a restroom, you see Tom Cruise get him down on the ground, and then he has him read this poem. Yeah. And the poem itself is basically has every sound in the English language. And then that's fed into a computer which processes it so slowly. Yeah, very slowly.
Relatively slowly.
I need more seconds.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in the DeLorean. Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly? The podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Oluseyi.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly? Your mission, if you choose to accept it, determine whether this is really my voice or whether I'm being manipulated. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Does It Fly?
I have one Mission Impossible scene in my head that when you hit the theme music, that's what I saw. And it was Tom Cruise coming from the ceiling, whoop, and stopping just before hitting the floor.
That's right. If you happen to be listening instead of watching, Hakeem just did a whole little imitation of the scene where Tom Cruise is lowered on wires and almost hits the floor. In fact, he actually does, and that's the take that they used.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
You're coming hard and heavy early with the behind the scenes insights.
Welcome to Does It Fly, everybody. I'm Tamara Krinsky. I am here with Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi, a.k.a. Dr. O, and you have obviously figured out that we are talking today about Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible. If the mission is impossible, it's the right mission. So what we're going to talk about today is a particular device. And I don't know what the producers are thinking because this one already exists over and over again. So what am I here to talk about, Tamara? What am I here to talk about?
All right. We are specifically, let's give a little bit of background first. And of course, this is where we tell you, we are going to be going into some spoilers. So if Mission Impossible is new to you and you don't want spoilers, then we suggest you click pause, go watch, come back, keep watching us or keep listening to us. Mission Impossible, of course, started as a TV show.
I could not miss in my youth. Go ahead.
1966 to 1973. And then it was rebooted. It actually had a TV reboot in the mid-'80s. And then discovered by the next generation with the first release of a Mission Impossible film in 1996.
Watch that one too.
We have a true fan here.
Hey, man, I can say the same for Love Boat. Fantasy Island, Cheers, all that.
And this is why we love talking about this stuff, because I am a pop culture expert who loves science, and Hakeem is a scientist who loves pop culture.
Indeed,
and we love talking with each other about this stuff.
Yes, we do. So, I love to debate. You know what I'm saying? I just love to throw my opinion out there and dare you to disagree with me. And then immediately fold once you do.
Well, today we're going to specifically be talking about an element that we see in Mission Impossible 3, which is voice cloning and modulation. If it's been a minute since you happen to see this particular Mission Impossible movie, there is a scene where Tom Cruise, who plays Ethan Hunt, our star of the show, he has to impersonate the character who is played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, Owen Davian. As you know, they are very physically different creatures in this movie. And part of that is he's got to impersonate his voice. So basically, a vocal strip is placed over his throat as part of that disguise. And Hakeem will get a little bit more into how that works as we get into the science of it all. And he believably passes himself off as Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. So today we're going to talk about the science of whether that's possible, probable, how that could work. And then we'll get a little bit more into the story and how they put it all together. And then we'll talk about, does it fly for the vibes?
Yeah, well, we are living in the age of artificial intelligence. So this whole idea of voice cloning and voice modulation is real. It's happening. And you do not want to fall for the scam because they're out here cloning voices and using that to break security. So yeah, let's get into the science of voice cloning and modulation as seen in Mission Impossible.
Okay, go.
Fine, wait outside.
When they made this did not exist. Today it does. You can choose your voice. So if your voice is the voice you choose, if it's a star or a media personality, say, there are lots of examples of that person's voice online to be found to train an AI on. And then from that point forward, all you have to do is feed text to that AI, and that AI can read it and sound like the voice of the person, even with the modulations that occur due to emotion and circumstance and, internal and external circumstances, right? Be nervous, be excited, be sad, right? So this is game-changing technology. So the one scammy manifestation that I read about online, I don't know if it's true or not, but it just was everywhere online in 2024, was that someone gives you a call and they say, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And if you say yes, they record that and then use it somehow, right? They call your bank and say, yes.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But what makes Mission Impossible so different is that it's a human-to-human interaction. It's not a human-to-machine interaction, right?
Yeah.
So the way it manifests now is I can make a, say, for example, I want to take AI and make a Tamara Krinsky character, right, using imagery and videos of you, and I want to give it your voice. I can do that. If I want your voice...
Not legally, but yes.
Not legally, right. Not until I hypnotize you and have you signed over the rights of your likeness and sound throughout
I
the
think my union would have a few things to say about that.
And then I will hypnotize your union and get them to turn over to me.
You want to try hypnotizing Fran Drescher? Good luck.
She's the head of the union, Fran Drescher now?
She's the head of SAG-AFTRA, yeah. She's our president.
Oh, man, I might be batting above my average now. I don't know if I can handle Fran. She seems to have a strong personality.
She does, thank goodness. We were very, very fortunate we were very fortunate for that in our last round of negotiations.
I bet, right?
For those who may be unfamiliar, SAG-AFTRA is the union that represents actors and voiceover artists and newscasters and all of that. But getting back to
I'm a member since 2020. All right.
Getting back to the science of all of it. So as you mentioned, right, so there's AI and we've seen a lot of that, but I'm curious if you have thoughts on, this is back a ways before we had access to so much of the AI stuff that we're now all talking about. And as you said, this is person to person. So I'm curious if you have thoughts about how this could have been possible kind of with biology, with throat mechanics, with all of that.
Yeah, so that's the toughie. So how can you, in real time, someone is looking at you and you're going to literally speak and sound like a different person.
Yeah.
Even if, how does that work? And so that one is a difficult one for me to come to grips with. Like, there are people that exist that can just do this sort of thing, like Jamie Foxx. Right? Jamie Foxx, I love when he does voices.
If there's any indication that America is not the most incredible country in the world, and yes, we can.
So there's something physiologically and mentally that give them that ability to hear, match, know what they're, it's like music. If you have an ear for the note, you can hit the note, but there is a physiological component that allows you to hit that note, and how, the richness of the note that comes out also depends on your physiology. So how do you take the ability to hear a voice and in real time speak it out with your own voice, and yet it sounds like them. So it tells me that it's not a speaker, right? The way that the sound is being produced is not a speaker. This thing is on the neck here. So that tells me that it's somehow interfacing with the voice box. And so the sound of the voice is just not, it's not simply the vibration of the vocal cords, right? You have a resonant cavity here that gives the sound its character. And, you know, some people's voice can be down in their chest. Some people's voice could be nasally. You know, there's all these subtle elements to what a voice sounds like. And you can't do it all by just manipulating the voice box, I would imagine. But it could be that I'm suffering from a lack of imagination.
Well, something that's interesting here too is like when you look at this scene, part of what creates the tension in the scene is that they needed a vocal sample from Davian, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. So a big piece of the scene is where, you know, you see Tom Cruise, they're in a restroom, you see Tom Cruise get him down on the ground, and then he has him read this poem. And the poem itself is basically has every sound in the English language. And so that essentially gives them, it's actually a poem, it's written by Neil Whitman, and it's got all the sounds and what are known as phonemes. And then that's fed into a computer, which processes it so
slowly.
Yeah, very slowly.
Relatively slowly.
I need more seconds.
Yeah,
So
not fast enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's as you're saying, there's a voice box component, but then there's also like a computer. So that tells me, like, going with something I've learned from you, you know, in doing these shows together, is to look at what's the environment in and how does that shape the action that's happening on screen. So if they somehow had to feed it through the computer and then that's going back to whatever, that's somehow connected to this thing on his neck.
Right. Yeah. Because I didn't think of it that way. You're right. I thought of it simply as a trainer. But
maybe
you now have to feed it back to the device and then have the device shape the voice in that way. So that is that's a whole other element. If there is a transmission issue, which always takes time, there's no such thing as instantaneous communication, even if you think it is, like you and I sitting here right now. You know, just like the speed of light. You can't instantly see anything. It takes time for light to travel. So that holds a whole other element. If there is so I wonder because here's the thing. The guy on the end who is using this recorded sample to generate the voice, and he says, okay, I'm ready now. They don't say, I'm ready now to upload this profile to your device. It is pretty much, it's ready to go. It is trained now.
Right. So is it right? So it begs the question, like, I'm almost like picturing like a pathway, right? Like, you know, I say something to you, you've got this thing on this device on your throat. And when you're saying something back to me,
right.
Is the throat tape basically almost like a software patch on your vocal cords? So that
I would hope that there's a device in my pocket that is the brain for this thing. Mm-hmm. And that particular device on my neck can do a couple of things. One thing is that sound travels as a wave, right? And one characteristic of waves is that when they collide, they add. So that is how, for example, noise canceling earphones work. I hear the noise outside with a microphone. I pick that up. And now the brain inside the microphone calculates those waveforms and then sends to your ear the waveform of the noise, the opposite waveform. So if this one is +5, I'm going to send you a -5. So they go to 0, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this thing here can take the sound that you're already speaking, measure it, or maybe there's already a profile for you as a person there. And so if I know the sound output that I want, I can send in perhaps vibrations into your voice box that manipulates your your vocal cords. And then I can have little transducers that would add vibrations to the sound. So when those vibrations are added to your native voice, I can manipulate it to come out with a voice of whatever pitch or modulation I want. I think you just invented a new technology.
I have a silly question.
Yes,
what's
ma'am.
a transducer?
Oh, a transducer is an electronic device that either takes a non-electrical signal and turns it into an electrical signal, like a microphone, or a speaker that takes an electrical signal and turns it into a non-electrical signal. So,
Okay.
yeah. So that's a general term for, I put my probe in the water and it tells me the pH, right? So pH has been converted to an electrical signal, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
So it helps translate information into electrical signals in some way, shape, or form, essentially.
Yeah. And so for those of you out there who are also growing crops this spring and summer, that example did not come out of nowhere. I am so happy with my new little soil tester. I'm buying chemicals to get my soil pH right and all this jazz. Yeah. So I don't know what crops you got growing this summer. Tomorrow,
So I was going to say something people may not realize that you and I have in common is that we're both like nerdy gardeners.
Yeah. And I have 4 new chickens. Hatched them from eggs.
I was going to say, can you send me some eggs? Because egg prices are still pretty darn high over here in LA.
I went to Costco yesterday and there were no eggs available.
Really?
None. Yeah. None. Zilch. Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. So in any case, what we're hearing here is this device takes a sample and does not just play back the voice like today's AI does, but really works with the wearer of the device somehow to shape their voice into the voice of the person they're attempting to mimic. Now, knowing that that is the goal, how would I reverse engineer that particular technology? It does not seem impossible to me. It may be. There may be limits to what you could do to manipulate the voice by something on the neck. But could you manipulate the voice via manipulation of vocal cords, via manipulation of even if it has like a internal muscle-like thing such that it could change the shapes of things, it could shape the physiology that generates your voice, and it could potentially feed sound that, you add waves, it's called superposition, right? That when superimposed on your own voice, you generate the desired vocal tones that you want. But there will be limits, right? Like, do you know the singer Michelle, who used to sing with Dr. Dre and them? She had that song, something like that, right? But her singing voice is so powerful, but then when she speaks, it's like, "Hi, I'm Michelle," right? It's little like, could my deep manly voice be converted to Michelle's voice? I don't think my physiology would allow that.
And how do you pronounce your name?
Michelle.
Say it again.
Michelle.
Michelle.
Very good.
Okay.
Now I'm leaving and you know I tried. You don't appreciate the time I take.
Vibrational frequency is something that could potentially be manipulated, but can it? Like the way I say that, I was a brass musician and a woodwind. I played flute and tuba, but I did not have the embouchure. My big lips could not get a sound out of a French horn or a trumpet mouthpiece, right? So it's a matter of vibration. So a similar question is, could I imagine attaching some device to my inner lips, say, that allows me now to play French horn? It's kind of the same problem. If I'm manipulating the vocal cords of, these vibrating membranes, could I? And so that one seems more difficult. So that says to me that perhaps violating the vocal cords to get out different frequencies may not be unlimited in unlimited ability. There might be a range, given your particular vocal cords, there is a frequency range that you can access using this device. And outside of that, you cannot. Shaping the character of the voice, again, that's even more complex because it has to do with the shapes of your resonating cavities and what happens with your tongue and your teeth and your lips. So, on the one hand, sampling a voice and reproducing that voice electronically, yes. Sampling a voice and then repeating and then modifying a speaking human so that they sound exactly like that person? Approximately.
So it sounds like,
The big error bar.
given that you're saying it's possible, probably, but there are some limits, sounds like it would fly, but only on a short-term flight.
Yikes. I'm going to have to say, on balance, it flies. On balance, it flies. Even if it's even if it's JetBlue.
Okay. All right. Well, shifting into, this, where the story of this all and the role that it plays in the story and kind of how it plays out.
Yeah.
It's an interesting piece. I mean, what's fun about this is, this isn't like a major, like this is something we see in one small piece of this movie. It's not something, that we then see repeated later on in Mission Impossible 3, but it's a really pivotal scene because it sets up a lot of the action for the rest of the movie. So it's got to be believable. What's so interesting to me is that, when we do these shows, I'll go and I'll like research how they did it and how it was shot and all of that. And usually there's a fair amount of intel out there about, what we did. And when it comes to the Mission Impossible movies, especially, there's all these awesome breakdowns of how they did all the stunts.
Right.
What is noticeable about this one is that I could not find a definitive video, behind the scenes, anything about how this scene was done.
You or me. I also searched.
Yeah. So, like, on one hand, it makes me think they don't want you to know. On the other hand, maybe I just, didn't find the right corner of the dark web. So for anybody listening or watching, if you actually have a verified, studio blessed, like, oh, yes, this is how we shot this scene, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a video, anything that you find, please drop it in the comments because I'd love to see it. I'm going to try and describe it for the people who are listening as opposed to watching the podcast. And so basically, they're putting together this big physical dupe of Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. So you see Tom Cruise's character, Ethan Hunt, put on this 3D printed rubber mask that they have concocted down in the bowels of the Vatican. And he puts the mask on, and you see that happen in a shot as he puts the mask over his head. And then the camera circles around. And so for just a second, the screen goes dark. And then you see it come around the other side of, the person who's placing it over his head. And you see a person with clearly wearing a mask because you still see like eye holes. So he hasn't like completely transformed. And then you see Ving Rhames' character kind of pressing and massaging it and making it fit. So the whole thing is a combination of practical effects and visual effects, but you're never quite sure. Like, we know it's Tom Cruise to start, but what you're not sure is, when does it become Philip Seymour Hoffman? What CGI is put over him? When does, or visual effects, like you're never quite sure when it's who until then, it continues and goes on from there. So yeah, it's tricky.
It's tricky.
It's tricky, but it is convincing. We're just not sure exactly how it was done.
But and it's cool though how they use it to create this tension in the story, right? I've often felt like thrillers are manipulating my emotions because they do that.
You feel correctly.
Right? They just do it over and over and over again, which is an important part of them, is making you feel things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And part of what I think the voice modulation does here, and let's remember, like, this is a much earlier time. This is 2006. Mm-hmm. And so again, like, as we mentioned before, AI was not a thing back then. I mean, to put it in perspective, like, YouTube had just launched.
Wow.
Like, right. So just to kind of seriously, oh my God, if my future self could go back in time travel. So if you think about that, just context wise, like where we were, it makes sense that it was, sort of a physical manipulation. But this idea, you're in the middle of a thriller and this paranoid sort of mindset, who can you trust? Who's a double agent? Who's, doing bad to who? And suddenly the idea that you can't actually trust that the person who is in front of you in real life is the person you think they are helps to add to that paranoid feeling of this action thriller.
And finally, the politicians are right. Don't believe your eyes and your ears. Believe what I say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think like that is what's so interesting to me. And the other thing that's interesting to me too is Tom Cruise wanted something really specific for Mission Impossible 3 that's kind of related to this, which is, the first two movies were very much auteur movies. They were very much had the imprint of their directors. And I'll get to that in one sec. This movie was directed by J.J. Abrams, and there was a shift. Tom Cruise really wanted a more personal story. He wanted something that was going to have a different kind of motivation. And so it was much more tapped. There's a love story, there's romance going on here. He gets married. So the idea of tapping into this paranoia that taps into your adrenaline system, that taps into your protectiveness over, your wife who's being threatened by Philip Seymour Hoffman, like all of it all kind of ties together to make a shift in the franchise that then really plays out later. Yeah. But something, speaking of directors, that and I'm going to look at my notes here because there's there's very specifics here, but this was really cool. So the original Mission Impossible was one of 3 major television properties acquired by Paramount when they purchased Desilu Studios from Lucille Ball. The others were The Untouchables and Star Trek.
What?
The film of The Untouchables in 1987 was directed by Brian De Palma, who directed the first Mission Impossible film in 1996.
Wow.
This film, Mission Impossible 3, is directed by J.J. Abrams, who went on to direct Star Trek in 2009. It was written by his longtime collaborators, Alec Kurtzman and Roberto Orci, who also worked together on Alias, the Star Trek movies, and Fringe. And then, of course, Alex Kurtzman is way, way, way involved with all of the majority of the current Star Trek properties that are out there. So,
right, yeah.
My brain,
Yeah, the connections, so many connections. Mm-hmm. So what does this mean? For the story?
I think
this tiny little element in this really intense scene.
It's a tiny little element in an intense scene. I think it's a really good example of how small details matter because it does set up kind of what happens then for the rest of the movie with this, conflict with Tom Cruise and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah. I think it contributes to the paranoid tone. Yeah. I think the fact that they don't get into the real specifics of how it works in some ways is to its benefit. They don't weigh it down with that. But at the same time, there's enough tech and cool stuff surrounding it that you're like, sure, you put the thing on. They can do the cool 3D printing in the moment. They can,
Mission Impossible.
They get the voice, they show that you need a voice sample. Well, it's what you just said. It's Mission Impossible. Yeah. And they are supposed to do impossible things. You are surrounded by impossible technology, impossible stunts. And, similarly in that same way to Bond movies, it's so much fun. It's an adrenaline ride. Yeah. Nothing about what they do with this knocks me out of it so much that I'm like, nah, it doesn't work. That ruined the movie for me. So in that case, I say, yeah, it flies.
Yeah, right. You know what? You just inspired a thought in my mind. I guess I hadn't really looked at it this way before. Yeah. But the thing that I had noticed is how often the evil scientist shows up, the evil engineering that they do, right? Right. But then as you talked about, as you brought in, it was Mission Impossible, James Bond, I started thinking about Batman, but there are these brilliant scientists and engineers for good who create these technologies that the heroes then utilize, right? That is, now I will, that's how the world works. Sometimes you only see the negative manifestation, even though there is a positive manifestation.
Oh, I have a pitch for you.
Pitch it.
You know what movie I want? I want the movie, or at least the podcast, of the secret society of the engineer inventors behind everybody. So I want like to go to the annual like secret society meeting where you get like Alfred and Jarvis and
dope.
Q and like having their
Let's write it.
Yeah.
Let's write it.
Done.
We got to come up with a villain. Oh, I love that. That is so cool. Yeah.
That would be super fun. And we've only got to get like 9 studios to agree that we can.
But now they're the heroes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And who we killing off? Alfred? Jarvis? Well, Jarvis is AI, right?
I don't want to kill it. Well, he wasn't originally. I don't want to kill off anybody.
You got to kill somebody off. What kind of a story doesn't kill off someone you love?
No. Hey, story doesn't work without conflict. All right. So now that we've decided, okay, so it flies in limited. It flies in limited ways for the science, for the story. We've said, it does fly for sure. Let's talk about the vibes. Does it fly for the vibes?
Well, think about the story of Sergio Bergerac. What the hell is his name?
Cyrano de Bergerac? Cyrano de Bergerac.
Cyrano
de Bergerac.
Yeah, that complicated, unpronounceable name. Imagine
It's
if he had that technology.
It's French. It's le français.
Français.
Yeah.
Fromage.
For the vibe. Does it fly for the vibe?
Does it fly for the vibe, me love? You're making me think of that skunk. Pepe Le Pew.
Pepe Le Pew. Does it fly for the Pepe Le Pew?
If you had this kind of technology, then, it's not just what you're saying, but it's also the sound of your voice. And that has a huge impact. So people I'm not going to mimic your voice. I'm just going to turn my voice into something smooth and textury. Or I'm going to tune my notes. Like I sometimes watch these, I watch music videos on YouTube, like music history. And there's this one guy called the Professor of Rock I watch a lot. But anyway, another thing that I've been watching is there are these people that look at how music is made. And one thing they do is reveal how often people are tuning their voices. And what you see is when they create the waveform, it lands right on the line of the note, right? Mm-hmm. So that sort of thing is what we will use it for, right? We will.
So here's kind of like the deeper vibe question that I'm curious to talk about, which is this idea of trust. So, we've talked both about what I'll call computer manipulation through AI. We've talked about physical manipulation with, transducers and space and voice boxes and all that kind of stuff. But regardless of how it happens, and especially in today's world, if you can't count on the idea that what you are seeing is real, what does that do for trusting in the world you see in front of you?
We already live that. So there's this phrase that goes something like, men are motivated by beauty. So women wear makeup and hair extensions and all that. Men are motivated by what they see. So women do that. Women are motivated by what they hear. So men lie.
So, I don't know if that's true, but it's funny.
It will be another layer of lying, right? So it will be makeup for voices in a way,
Right.
Yeah, it would be. But think about all of the things you could do. Like 2 people that I've always been envious of are people who can sing and also have perfect pitch. I think
Sure, me too.
Yeah, and people who can draw. Man, if I had that thing, I'm still belting out all my out-of-tune songs every day anyway. So if I had that thing, oh man, I would, I'd be standing in the subway, jamming all day.
Do you think his voice part of identity? Do you think that we lose something?
Absolutely. I feel that a particular person is going to wear a few outfits, not an infinite number of outfits. And so I do think that unless they have some particular momentary agenda that requires them to, take on a voice they don't normally take on, I feel like they're probably gonna have a set of voices, kind of like me. You know, I got my blue t-shirts, my black t-shirts. It's not much variation in what I wear, and there probably wouldn't be much variations in the voices that I use, right? It would all depend on how I want to impact the person I'm communicating with. And you know, even then, I feel like, you know, you might start off all over the place, but you will hone it in to what has value for you in your particular life. But the whole idea of AI leading to a world that you can't trust what you see and you can't trust what you hear. Oh, it is. We are, if we have not yet arrived, it's a matter of, you know, we have arrived, but it hasn't scaled to being completely everywhere. Like
it feels like it's about to. It feels like it feels like we're right there. I mean, honestly, I don't know when they're releasing this, but by the time it comes out, like, it would not surprise me if, you know, a headline was, One
of the things I saw recently that was hilarious to me, they started with the scene of Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, the meeting he had at the White House with Trump, J.D. Vance, and all the other members of the cabinet and press, and they had them fight. They had them go into a fist fight, right? It started out, but it was hilarious. It was done as a joke, right? But the way they implemented it, it really was funny. And so, you know, a lot right now with AI, especially visual, it's a little too, you can still tell it's AI, right? If they're doing anything that is, you know, more than just existing simply, you can see sort of like the glitch in the matrix, right? You can see the glitches in the matrix. And of course, that's going to evolve. That's going to iterate to being optimized. It's not quite there yet. But, you know, imagine that now comes from, now you've taken it from the realm of screens to the realm of human to human interaction. I can't believe what I see. Can't believe, right? Again, like the show I'm Gonna Get You Sucker with the Wayans brothers, where he makes some confession, one of the Wayans brothers, and a woman that he's about to make out with starts pulling off body parts. She pulls off her false leg, pulls off her wig, takes out her fake eye. You know,
yeah. Well, look, nobody likes feeling duped. That's for sure. You know, and obviously there's all kinds of implications for the entertainment industry. I mean, that's what we went to bat for in our strike, our most recent strike. And, you know, the voiceover industry obviously is a huge piece of that. You know, I was, again, kind of going down the rabbit hole of like, what would this technology mean if it were in the world, and where are we with it now in the world? You know, I came across, there's an actor named Ben Shields, and he kind of wrote a whole piece on it. And so this is what he wrote. He wrote, I believe voiceover will go down first. It already has been. I just saw a mock-up of AI changing an actor's mouth to speak in different languages. No more dubbing, no more retakes. Voiceover without an image is even less work for a computer-wielding creator. And even with protections, the voiceover industry will soon be over. Once there's a library of consonants, vowels, diphthongs, plosives, etc., it's done. And then he goes on to talk about actors, and he says, it's my prediction that over time, the stars we know and love will be protected until they pass on. In the meantime, the industry will create new stars, AI stars. And once the current human stars are gone, the industry won't need live humans anymore, at least on devices.
Right, yeah. They did it to me.
I mean, that's a really pessimistic version, but
no, it happened to me, Tamara. It happened to me. They stole me.
Who stole you? What happened?
Disney. Have you not seen the movie Soul? They stole me, didn't give me credit, right? They owe me, I mean, I'll settle for like 30 million at this point, you know.
I'll let you work that out with Disney.
Yeah, let them know.
But seriously, honestly though, just because like there may be people listening or watching who actually really think you're.
Oh, no. Like, listen, it's clear the obvious similarity between the way I look and the lead character of Soul. But, you know, what I think about when I think about this is right now, as a professional, I write, I do voiceover, I do on-screen work. I am as threatened as anyone, right? I have a distinctive voice. Every generation disappears and is replaced by a new generation with a new normal, right? And so what is being a creator going to look like when humans aren't necessary except as the people who are prompting? So you don't even need to create the vision and ideas anymore. You'll have a AI. You're like, hey, give me 100 movie ideas. Give me, and then
I'd like to hope that isn't the case, but I don't know.
The cat's out of the bag. Human technology, once, it's hard in today's world for technology to be lost. In the old world, where you could have something like the Bronze Age collapse and, the leading civilizations are destroyed and knowledge is lost, that no longer exists. You're not going to wipe out the entire planet. Our knowledge has been so, most of it spread out throughout the world for every human to have access to it. That
it has, although it brings up an interesting question, because there's a ton of sci-fi out there where there has been disaster upon disaster around the planet. And so there isn't electricity anymore. There isn't computing power anymore. There isn't. And then it's at that point, like, oh God, I wish I could remember the name of the novel. I'm totally blanking. But a big piece of it is it's a galaxy-wide thing. It's called The Great Forgetting. Basically, at that point, everything was digital. And when it all went, there was, a great catastrophe and it all went away and all of that knowledge was lost.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's tough to do, but it's not impossible, right? It is not impossible to do.
Yeah.
It's like these post-apocalyptic movies where they discover a library and they're like, ooh, look what the ancients could do, right? So I feel like the cat's out of the bag for our generation. And so, it's going to be, so as we look from ourselves to millennials to Gen Z, Gen Z it's a whole new playing field for them. They're just coming to adulthood. And, it's almost like the organization I'm leading right now, it made a lot of money from publications. And over the last 20 years, that source of revenue, just like everything that's based on publications, has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And, for now it is, okay, now we not go to new media to tell these stories, right? We have to do it through these new platforms. Right. And so I just wonder if it's going to be a situation where there is a model for creators to transform how we create. Because you got to imagine, going all the way back to pre-civilization, there were the entertainers there.
Oh, look, there's storytelling, like we know. Storytelling has been part of, human interaction forever. So there's two pieces of it, right? There's how are future stories going to be told using the tools available at the time? And like you're saying, the cat's already out of the bag. Like, we have generative AI. There are a lot of different tools available. I think we're, for me, part of what gets, and that's going to be a whole new kind of storytelling. For me, part of where it gets tricky and sticky is when you have sort of this mesh of human storytelling and machine-led storytelling, but the machine-led storytelling is only able to do what it does because it has been unethically trained on human storytelling. Like when you feed a whole bunch of screenplays that you are not authorized to do so, that you have not been given permission to train your machine on, you feed that into an AI and then say, now write me something in the style of this. Like, that's not okay. Like, another example is, so we were talking about voiceover artists. Yeah. There was a really great feature in Entertainment Weekly this spring on the Pixel Pack, which is the nickname that a group of video game voiceover artists who have given themselves. And they're like a severely underrated group of performers who do amazing work. Yeah. And so this is one of the things that they talked about. So AI is another issue brought up by multiple members of the Pixel Pack. Nuban shares, who's one of the people profiled, shares a character creator app once featured his voice as part of its library without permission. It wasn't even his Asterion voice, his character voice. He notes it was his own voice, Neil Nuban's voice. And he said, that was definitely a boundary overstepping, he comments. This is the problem with AI, that people are very carelessly using it to not only create characters that they shouldn't be using, but also people. And that's a problem. Like, I, as a creator, don't feel good about my stuff being used to train stuff that I then don't have a financial stake in or haven't given my permission.
Well, I guess it's going to be a matter of response, right? So if you look at, for example, what happened with music when things like Napster and LimeWire came about, and you look at how publishing saw that coming, and they put controls in place so that their properties are accessed in the ways that they want it to be and cut down on a lot of the pirating. Then you have things like advertisers, right? So at the end of cable, there was, the DVR. Now I can record it and skip all the commercials. But then everyone went to online streaming, and at first you could skip the commercials on those. And then they made it somewhat impossible, unless you're paying a fee, right, to get rid of these commercials. So I'm wondering if there is going to be a response in the same way that will allow controls to be put in place so that if you can change your voice in real time, if you can, change the face of it's almost like when you go into the room with the green screen and all the dots on your body and then they replace you with the avatar.
Motion capture. Yeah.
It's a, we will pay you to be that raw good, and then every time you're used, you receive a royalty. I don't know what the model is going to be. I'm just speculating.
Well, that's actually, that is part of some of the current models. So, I guess, look, I believe that at the end of the day, technology is a tool and can be used for good. It can be used for bad. As a creator, as a creative person, I would like to believe that we humans bring a little something special to it. Maybe one day our machine counterparts will do the same. I don't believe in the idea of stopping development of technology because you're afraid of what's happening next. And I believe in the adoption of new tools that allow for new things. I have an Emmy and it's for interactive storytelling. It was for storytelling on new platforms. So clearly I believe in the idea of exploring these tools. But I also think that if you've created something and other people are then making money off of it, you should be compensated for that as well. So when I think about the larger sort of answer to, does the idea of vocal changing fly for the vibes? My answer is I don't particularly enjoy these vibes because right now I think we're in a weird place where there's a lot of not cool things happening.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your pilot, and we're experiencing some rough air. I'm just going to ask you to buckle your seatbelt and keep the faith. It's going to work out. Because we're going to work it out. It's not going to work out by happenstance, right? What's her name? Who's leading the union? What's her name? The nanny?
Fran Drescher.
Fran Drescher. She's gonna protect us. So listen, I love being creative, and I love to receive credit for what I've done. Not always possible. Like, I never get credit for that big marijuana leaf in that tuba at Stanford University, but I painted that in 1992. But yeah, so, I'm going to say it does fly because I can think of so many awesome uses for it, and the cat's already out of the bag. And, I want to see the tools that our generations create in the hands of the new generations. And just like, I got my millennial and Gen Z kids, I'm Gen X. They're nowhere near as mean as I am, right? I asked my son, how many fights have you had in your life? He said, none. I had 1,000 fights by the time I was 12, right? The new generations, we have to, with human beings, we keep creating systems and institutions and instruments that have these dual opportunities for great good and great bad. And it's our job to regulate that bad so that it does not manifest and take advantage of the good. And I feel like this is another one of those cases where hopefully we can get there and achieve the idealistic future of Star Trek.
I love the optimism. So that is the message we will leave all of you with today.
Yeah.
If there are examples of vocal duping, interesting things that you're seeing with AI, we would love for you to share them with us, things that you think are cool. So leave them in the comments. Tune in every Friday for a new episode of Does It Fly, where we will discuss the science and story of your favorite gizmos and gadgets and sci-fi, fantasy, and other genre movies and TV shows. And Hakeem, where can they find out more about us?
You can find us at Does It Fly Pod. Our website is doesitflypod.com. On social media, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Does It Fly Pod. On YouTube, you can search on Does It Fly Pod, and you can also look on the channel of Roddenberry Entertainment and find the Does It Fly podcast.
That's right. We are a part of the Roddenberry family of podcasts, and thank you for joining and being part of our family today. We will see you next time.
Thank you for joining. Don't you just love Tamara?